Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to WCS America, and we have Moonglade leading 1-0 after a very nice prepared build on Whirlwind. Really cool to see that build come out, and we've only really seen that a couple of times. You know, it's the kind of thing that I believe Life did Departing, if I recall correctly. It's a slight variant of it, but it is nice to punish greed. It is nice to punish lack of scouting, both of which Crank fell victim to.
Definitely something as a Protoss you have to be aware of when you do these builds where you may not have the full wall in. You definitely want to use this guide. And of course, most of the time that won't happen, and not scouting saves you a little bit of minerals, so it's kind of playing an odds game. Game number 2, Crank is definitely going to be more careful for that build, but I don't see any chance of Moonglade trying that on a 2-spawn map here on Cloud Kingdom.
No, that would be very strange indeed. You could look at the size of it. A classic map, of course. Something that was a staple of the 2012 StarCraft 2 Wings of Liberty scene. Still around for Heart of the Swarm, and it's still actually giving some great games as well. So I'm glad to see Cloud Kingdom has not been fully retired yet.
One of my favorite maps. Of course, again with a pylon in his main base. At the bottom left hand of Cloud Kingdom, the red Protoss, Crank.
Versus his opponent to the northeast position, currently up 1 game in this best of 3 series, representing Australia, the land of killer koalas. He is Moonglade.
Overlord trotting across the map, or maybe
or is it a drop bear? Who knows?
Yeah,
you can't be sure with these Australian Zergs, man.
They do have a little bit of different style.
They do, very much so. And we actually see a gateway expand here from Crank. And, you know, this is the kind of position where it would have been nice to actually see that greedy build come out again. And my concern at this stage is that Crank is being a bit mind-gamed by this. Because this gateway expand, of course, I think is as a result of what happened to him in Game 1.
It could be. It's hard to tell. Gateway expands have become pretty popular.
Yep, they have.
On non-Whirlwind maps. Whirlwind, of course, the reason why the gateway expands are popular is because you get warp gate so much faster, and then you can put on all this pressure early. Whirlwind's a big enough map. A lot of Protoss still favor the faster Nexus.
Yep.
But we'll see how Crank follows this up. I'd be very surprised to see him get those Zealots that we saw out of state when he did this expansion build.
Certainly. A little bit of a later hatch here from Moonglade, actually a hatch on 16, which is generally what you don't see, but in this case, just getting a maximum number of minerals, not really feeling threatened at this stage. And the Cybernetic score coming down here as well. These are about as back in the base as you can possibly get them. Overlord scouting will, of course, be delayed in that respect. Now, I'm interested to see what Crank decides to do. Second gas coming up at around the appropriate time, not as fast as a lot of Protoss put it out.
He is getting his Zealot, so that's a little bit interesting. It could be he's worried about that early pool. Of course, he hasn't scouted Moonglade yet. Moonglade has scouted him and knows that there's no fast Nexus going down, so that's why he's throwing down that Extractor and going to get that Zerging speed up as soon as possible.
Certainly true, and we'll see if I mentioned it to see when he brings the Mothership Core out, because that will open him up some early harassment opportunities and the ability to actually get aggression out on the field. But the question is whether he'll be able to actually make that work. He's going to go with a Nexus after this, so he will have the gas momentarily for that Mothership Core, and there it is.
And of course, next will be the Pylon to help start creating that wall. It is interesting. He did get that Zealot before the Nexus, which is, like we were talking about in State's opening, less common. Because normally as soon as that Mothership Core gets out, you're not really worried about any type of aggression.
Yeah.
But we could tell Crank was worried about that speeding build. Which can give people problems when they do the gateway expand.
Yeah, definitely. And it's always a problem in a tournament like this when you get basically blind countered in Game 1. Then you get yourself into this annoying mental state where you think, well, is he going to do it again? Or can I try that again? Is that just going to be a one-game thing? And, you know, maybe in this position, he was a bit more cautious as a result of losing to that in Game 1. Or maybe he always planned to go Gateway Expand on this map. You know, it's not like it's a build that really hurts him in any way. Stargate coming down right here. And the Ling is going to scout it immediately. So I'm almost kind of surprised that he put it down at that time, but I guess he didn't really have a choice. If he doesn't, then the timing is going to be extremely late. But that Zergling is being incredibly annoying and getting a lot of information for Moonglade.
Moonglade is very much taking full advantage of that Zergling inside Crank space. And one thing we notice is the Stargate, of course, wasn't hidden. and that really means that he doesn't intend to play some sneaky Stargate build.
Yeah.
And more often in Heart of the Swarm, you see players, the first Phoenix or the first Void Ray is shown and is already running around killing Overlords. And that's because I think Protoss players are figuring more and more to Zerg. The odds of catching Zerg off guard with like 3 Void Rays or 4 Phoenixes.
Just not going to happen anymore, especially with Spore Crawlers being so easy available and the prevalence of Queens as well. The fact that you're seeing a lot of Zerg playing a lot more Queens onto the map. In this case, though, we will see a Stargate-focused build with a fairly early +1. He's not afraid of showing that, which, again, is totally fine, because there's nothing that Zerg can actually do about it right now.
What Moonglade needs to do is make sure there's no proxy pylons. There's 3 warp gates up by Crank. He doesn't want to have any Zealots running around. Okay, the probe is spotted, and that's a big win for Moonglade, taking out that probe there. It's really, really hurtful to a Zerg to have to make a whole lot of Zergians at the 8-9 minute mark when really their opponent is teching, and the Zerg just wants to make pure drones and just get that huge economy heading up.
Yeah, certainly. So, great start there for Moonglade. In the meantime, Crank is now moving across the map with a couple of Phoenixes. Not going to be able to do a huge amount there. He'll be able to pick off an Overlord here and there, but 2 Phoenixes aren't really going to be killing all that many drones. So that's not really too big a concern. That +1 weapon is coming in. The Forge is coming in after that. The +1, of course, indicates that he does wish to go for a heavier air composition later on.
Moonglade's getting to Roach Warren, as well as the Evolution Chamber and an upgrade before Lair. And this might mean, I've seen Ghost User do, but okay, now he's getting Lair. Okay, I thought it might be some weird, crazy mass slow Roach speedling attack that I've seen Ghost User use before. But no, he just wants to really prioritize the upgrades. And that's not something too common you see in Zerg vs. Protoss, where Zerg invests in the upgrade before the Lair tech.
Yeah, certainly true. And now the Phoenixes will have a look around and see what they can see. Currently, both of these guys, following their respective build orders, not really deviating all that much as a result. I'm interested to see, since we're now seeing Void Rays on the field, we saw yesterday Alicia play Void Ray in almost every game. Obviously, he had only Zerg to play against. He played this one build with some slight variations. And there were some players that dealt reasonably well with it, Snoop being one of them. And then there were some players that didn't, Nest T being one of them, who unfortunately relied upon the strength of Corruptors against Void Rays, which almost always fails. So that's not exactly the ideal solution. Now, this Roach heavy, there's the Hydra Den coming down as well with the Roach speed. I have to ask you, and how effective do you think this build is going to end up being against the Stargate play?
We know what's interesting about this is this isn't that similar to what Snoot did, because Snoot really got the 3-base economy going before getting Roach Hydra, and he goes straight for Hive Tech, saying, okay, Roach Hydra Viper, very good against Colossi plus Void Rays.
Yeah.
But what Moonglade's doing is he's staying on 2-base economy for quite a long time. And that could mean he really wants to get Roaches and Hydras out earlier and focus more on denying the 3rd base of the Protoss.
Yeah.
But now he's going back into droning, so it could just be a little bit prioritizing attack. Maybe he was afraid of a 2-base timing from Crank behind the Phoenix. Because he still hasn't seen any intention of taking the 3rd yet, of course. Yeah. Crank was waiting to get some gate weakness down the field before he could really move out and take that 3rd base.
Queen's getting picked off by Crank here fairly effectively and finding a place where the Spore Crawler cannot reach, so he's doing some reasonable damage here. We've already got several workers killed as a direct result. Attempted attacks on the front, of course, with Lings are not really going to do anything. And the 3rd base, this is the interesting thing about this, the fact that you were talking about denying that 3rd base. A huge round of drones comes in from Moonglade. He obviously, having seen those units out on the map, knows the 3rd is being taken. So I have to wonder, does he really let the Protoss player take that 3rd uncontested here?
It looks like he will. He's made too many drones to really be able to power units and deny it now. It's 74 drones.
Yeah.
So the question is he really has 2 options. Either he has to immediately throw down to Infestation Pit and go to Hive Tech, because staying on ground Lair Tech against this style of Protoss is really not going to work in the long run. And he's invested too much into Roaches and Hydras with all the upgrades to really do a muta transition at this point. So either has to go straight to Hive, or he has to do something crazy like just say, okay, yes, I'm on high econ, but I'm going to try to just mass up so many Roaches and Hydras and continually rally them in and try to overwhelm them. In fact, he's making more and more Hydras.
A lot of Hydras.
He might just try to muscle Crank over, but against Colossi and Force Fields, it's going to be very tough for Moonglade to actually make this work.
Yeah, that would really require a mistake from Crank rather than a good play from Moonglade. There's only so much you can do with a bunch of Hydralisks. There's only so much micro you can use when Force Fields stop you, when Time Warp is available, when Photon Overcharge is available. it's a very difficult thing to do, and I'm actually very surprised to see that surge and not an attempted tech transition. It means he will want to attack, but there is a Spire going down. And the interesting thing about that is you might think, well, SkyToss beats Sky Zerg, right? Well, no. Mass Mutalisk can very much eliminate that if the Protoss player skips out on a lot of Phoenixes, which they do if they're only building air units from one Stargate. In this, I mean, I don't see this Hydralisk attack really doing much. I'm kind of surprised that it's even happening, but I guess we'll see, because it is going to hit, and it will hit pretty hard.
Oh, plus
Mothership Core's at the front there. That's a bad place to put it. Needs to get the time stop down. He gets the Photon Overcharge instead. And now the Hydra is trying to force this down. The
Nexus
force
is going
fields
to die.
are down. Yeah, it probably will, unless he gets really, really good target fire here. The force fields are good, though. He's trying to take this down. And yes, the Nexus will be killed off by this attack, which in itself, even if you lose a lot of Hydras, probably worth it for the third base. I mean, he took a lot of Hydralisk losses there, but what do you think about that attack?
I don't know. It's going to be so difficult to stop Crank if you just walks across the map. The one thing going for Moonglade, though, there's actually only 2 sentries for Crank. So if he can keep most of these Hydras alive with the speed upgrade, he should be able to do that. A massive Hydras concave can defend this counterattack. Normally, the force fields plus Colossi make Hydras worthless. But Crank doesn't have many force fields. He's going to be on creep. So with great positioning, Moonglade should be able to defend this without too much of a problem. Yeah,
we'll see what he can do. He's going to have 27 Hydralisks by the time this hits. There's going to be a few Corruptors. They may not be out by the time this hits. It very much depends on what Crank decides to do there. Will he actually place a pylon to back this up? He won't, which is quite surprising. Also, no Mothership Core. There is no recall option either. So he'll deny the 4th base, but he has to, as you said, take a really good fight.
Moonglade guarding top of the ramp with a great concave. Crank smart enough to know, okay, I don't have the mass force fields I need to go into a Hydras concave.
Yeah.
And there's no real reason to either. You know, he's at a situation, yes, he lost a third, but it's right back finish now. The economies are going to be very even from these two players, and Crank has a more cost-efficient combination. He's nearing maxed out against the Zerg, who's maxed out in pretty much Hydralisk and Corruptors, which is not particularly great against the Colossi Void Ray combination.
Now, Crank does have Observer coverage, which is allowing him to figure out exactly where his opponent is and kind of juke back and forward. He's also pushed the creep back heavily, so there's no creep around the 4th anymore, meaning that flanking is a little bit more difficult. But there is the possibility, if he keeps doing this, he will end up getting surrounded. It seems like now he's decided, you know what, I'm going to head back. He has forced his opponent to make 37 Hydralisks. So if a lot of Colossus come out from Crank, or maybe if the Storm transition comes in, then things will work out pretty well, I think, for him. So maybe that was enough. Here's a sneaky thing, though. Moonglade's actually taken a hidden base to the northwest, and that did not get scouted by the Phoenixes.
And that's exactly what Moonglade needs to do. In this position, he has no Vipers. When the battle happens, unless Crank puts himself in a terrible position, Moonglade's army is going to be annihilated. So what Moonglade needs to do is he needs to have a lot of gas income, so after his army is destroyed, he can either reload with something like 20, 30, 40 Mutalisks, or perhaps even just enough like Corruptor Roach to overrun Crank with reinforcements.
Looks like he's going to attempt to deny the 4th base here. And there's a lot of Colossi here. This is going to be a difficult engagement, but I think, yeah, he should be able to do that. Seems like Crank doesn't really want to directly engage there, but now he's getting into... That's actually a really nice concave there for Moonglade. The Corruptor's coming in as well. The Colossi, however, there's so many of them that should be enough to clean this up. Significant damage being done here by Moonglade, but that was shut down completely, and the supply dropped heavily for the Zerg player. This is very much opening up a massive counterattack window here. He's going to lose 2 more Hydralisks in the process. Crank should go and kill him right now while he has the supply advantage.
Oh, this is so unfortunate for Moonglade. He didn't have quite enough gas to do something like a 20 to 30 Mutalisk reload, so he's having to use Hydralisk again. But we're just going to see repeat of that same battle, except this time, Moonglade has even less.
There's a Mothership Core in it as well, so that's going to be even better. There's the blink forward. The Corruptor count is next to nothing. The Void Rays will melt their way through this army. With the Colossi coming in from the back, there is little chance of Moonglade stopping it. He knows it, and there's the GG. And Crank ties it up 1 apiece in this best-of-3 series.
A very dominant gameplay by Crank there. You know, Moonglade tried to make that Hydralisk Corruptor combination work, and just, you can't go head-to-head against Colossi Void Ray.
No, you can't.
Without either Vipers or like some mass meter type play.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of things that you can try and do in that kind of situation that don't involve building nothing but Hydralisks, and when you do, you know, even if you're on creep, it's going to be very difficult to get that positioning with the Protoss having the observers to see you coming and being able to react accordingly. It's much easier for the Protoss to position in such a way that the Colossus are doing maximum damage than the Hydra is doing maximum damage, especially since the Protoss has area denial weapons like the force field, which will actually prevent the Hydras from getting into a good position. So that went pretty much as well as you could expect there for Crank, I think. It was a nice attack in terms of taking down that third base. That was a really nice move from Moonglade, but I almost feel like after that, he should have immediately got into a defensive posture and thought about a transition, thought about a way to get out of that and not just keep building the same units. Because unfortunately, as we saw, Corruptors are rubbish. And
Hydras aren't too great either against Colossi.
No, they're not. And Corruptors have never been the most amazing thing against Colossus at the best of times. But with Void Rays added into the mix with that charge versus the armor, they melt very, very quickly. And as a result, Corruptors, it's a lot of gas that you could have spent in something else. Even though you think you need Corruptors, as soon as you see the 7 or 8 Void Rays and your Corruptors become nothing but dust to the wind, you think, man, that's such a bad unit. Why did I build that?
The 10 Corruptors could have easily been Hive Tech and 4 Vipers, right? And of course, abducting the Colossi makes the Hydras
Blinding
a lot
Cloud
happier.
in there as well. You know, you have to reposition into the Arc of Fire of the Hydras. I mean, what a better situation could you possibly be in there? Vipers are just such a good unit in that scenario. But from looking at that game, I think Moonglade was very, very worried about the counterattack. He realized he lost quite a few Hydras, and he lost more in the retreat. That's a problem with doing like a base denial with Hydralisks. You're not getting out of there unless you've laid yourself a red carpet of creep to escape. So in that situation, he was like, oh, he's going to counterattack me, takes out the 4th, he's going to hit the 3rd, or he's going to hit the natural. Quick, build, what units have I got that are good? Hydralisks. Yeah, let's build more of those. Because he doesn't have any other options. So instead of building tech, he has to build units to try and defend against that potential counterattack. The counterattack's more of a feint than anything else. And then Moonglade ends up with the wrong kind of composition. So a nice game there from Crank. Definitely doesn't really speak badly of Moonglade, and I'm looking forward to seeing Game 3 between these players. You are watching World Championship Series America here in New York City. We'll be right back.